Hey everyone, excited to be here. Thank you, Jen, for the introduction. And yeah, a little bit about me first. I'm Mustafa. Like Jen said, I'm a full-time instructor at View School, and also I'm the masterclass lead instructor. So the masterclass is build a View application from scratch to be production ready. If you're watching it, say hi in the chat. And I'm also out there in the wild. I'm a full stack developer. And today we're going to talk about unlocking Nuxt SEO power in your applications. So basically, I gave a similar talk later, or actually earlier this year at Frontend Nation, but now I customized it fully to be Nuxt specific. So you can consider it your crash course or your capsule, or maybe more like a checklist, because we're going to go through a lot of points that are important for SEO that are applicable to be applied anywhere, but we are going to go through how to do it in Nuxt. We're going to go fast to cover as much as possible. So you're going to be welcome to check out the slides afterwards. I'm going to share it on my social media. Yeah, use the slides as a reference to explore more about the options that I'm going to present to you. So without further ado, let's get started. First of all, we're going to talk about what is SEO. Well, SEO stands for Search Engine Optimization. And search engines, you can think of them as just one of your site's users. But they have a difference here, which is that they aim to improve your site's presence on the internet. So the term SEO itself refers to the actions you take to help search engines show your site to more users, which leads us to a very simple equation. Happy search engines equals high traffic. But to fulfill this equation, we need to know how do search engines visit the website. Well, they send ambassadors or bots, or maybe you can call them crawlers, those who crawl and investigate and properly see your content so that it can index and show it to other users on search engines. So those crawlers doesn't just rush and overload your servers with many requests. They need to follow a specific algorithm that doesn't impact or negatively impact your servers. And also, crawlers visit your site. You can think that they are visiting your site exactly like how a normal user would. So let's take, for example, this crawler hanging in the title. They're trying to visit the homepage in order to see what is it all about. So they send a request to the server, and the server then sends a response with the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript files needed to load this page. If we take a closer look at the HTML, in case of server-side rendered, we're going to see everything rendered on the server side. So the crawler will be able to see the body with all of the content, all of the HTML tags with its content on the server, and they will be able to index it normally. But in case of client-side rendering, they're going to see an empty HTML page. So for example, it's going to have a placeholder div where you mount your application and the script where you initiate or initialize your View application or Nuxt application. That's all what they are going to see. But I mean, you need to watch out here for a second, because with client-side rendering, it is possible to have SEO, right? It is possible, it happens. But there is a little caveat here. It's not as quick or as efficient with server-side rendering. And here is a screenshot from Google documentation. So the page may stay on the queue for a few seconds, but it can take longer than that. Once Google's resources allow, a headless Chromium renders the page and executes the JavaScript. So it really depends on whether there are resources available at that time or not. If there aren't, so you're going to have to be waited, or the page is going to have to wait on the queue until there are available resources to index the page. So it's not as quick or as efficient with server-side rendered applications. But with Nuxt, it offers the best of both worlds with universal rendering. It is the default rendering mode that you get from a new Nuxt application. And at first, or at the first glimpse, it will feel like a normal server-side rendered application without client-side features. So what happens is that Nuxt is going to translate all your Nuxt and View logic on the server side to render a fully HTML page with all its content on the server and send it as a static HTML to the browser to immediately render it. But at this point, Nuxt is secretly doing some magic behind the scenes. Nuxt is loading the JavaScript files needed to make this page dynamic and do all of the magical stuff we like to do with JavaScript without blocking the user from seeing the actual content. The user sees that immediately once the static HTML was sent to the browser from the server. And then Nuxt and Vue takes over to enable interactivity, achieving universal rendering. So you get the best of both worlds. And finally, we get a visually rendered page on the browser or in the browser, and then the crawler will be able to scan and index the content. So our goal is to make this journey as pleasant as possible, right? So we need to make them really, really happy. So crawlers are able to crawl your site by default, right? But there are three main things you need to make sure that you don't have in order to allow them to do so. The first thing, you need to make sure that you're not blocking bots. So the page that you want to index is publicly accessible. It's not hiding under or behind authentication wall. Every guest or end user can see the content. And you're not using any blocking meta tags, headers, or robots.txt. So if you have no index or no index for the meta tag or no index for the robots header, or at least you're not trying to disallow this user from crawling your site or specific URLs, then the crawler will be able to crawl your site normally. But if you have any of these, they will not be able to do so. They will be blocked from crawling it and even from indexing it. And also, you need to make sure that the page is working and returning 200 response. So it's not a broken image or something, sorry, broken page or something. And also, you need to make sure that it is indexable. The page content is indexable. So the first thing about indexable is that it's not spammy. So it doesn't fall under the spam regulations for the search engines. And the second thing is that it's indexable file type, which is one of those types, HTML, JPEG, XML, MP4, and many others you can explore here from the link in the slides. So we can do actually more. Like, we can do more than just allow them to access the page. We can help them discover even more pages. The first thing we can do is to optimize links. So search engines discover new pages via the links that they can see, the anchor text that they can see on the page. And using Nuxt link is just enough for that, because under the hood is just an anchor tag rendering as the anchor tag HTML element in the browser, so they will be able to crawl that easily. But you need also to avoid linking important pages with JavaScript and click event listeners. I mean, there are some cases that this is useful where you can do some programmatic navigation to some other page. But if this other page, something that you want to be indexed fast and you want to crawlers to be able to follow that link, then make sure to use Nuxt links instead of programmatic navigation when possible. And then also, preferably, all pagination links should be present in the DOM, and you can either make them fully visible, like if you have a page with a lot of content, so you can paginate it maybe to 100 pages, so make all of them fully visible, which of course this is going to make the page a little bit crowded, but you can hide them with CSS and that will solve it. The most important thing, that they exist in the DOM so that crawlers are able to crawl all of them. And also, another thing that people sometimes not aware of is that the link text matters. So for the first example here, we are linking to some Vue.js guide article. If you link the text, click me, it's not as good as if you link the text that describes what this link is all about. So the Vue.js guide is going to link to the Vue.js guide article. So it makes more sense to the crawler to understand that this link that you're linking to, this is not spam, this is not a useless link, it's relevant to the content of this page. And then you can use, of course, the Nuxt link checker. It's created by Harlan. We're going to mention his name a lot. So this is a module that you can grab with this command, and it will enable you to detect any broken links that you can have in your pages. So for example, if you have here the dashboard and it is broken link, then you will have the link checker tab in the Nuxt DevTools. This is going to show you the broken links that you have on the page with these curly red lines. And also is going to show you the mistakes. So here we have double D instead of dashboard. It is dashboard with an extra D. And that will allow you to fix it. The next thing we can help like crawlers with is to provide them with a sitemap. This will help them discover more URLs or more paths in our application. So for example, sitemaps are a big file or a big page with many links and details about the page's content. Here we have an example from Fox News sitemap.xml. Feel free to explore that. The URL tag they are using, it has the location tag for the href or the link for the page they want the crawler to discover, when it was last modified, how frequent does it change, and also the priority of the page. So you can even define from scale from 0 to 1 how important this page is for your audience. So you can tell them about the featured pages or the featured articles that they are 1 as the highest priority or 0 as the least priority. It depends. So it is really useful. I use it all the time, only if I have a big application with so many URLs. So another cool module by Harlan, it is called Nuxt sitemap, and it will provide you with powerfully flexible XML sitemaps that integrate seamlessly with Nuxt or for Nuxt. So by default, it's going to crawl your application, scan your application, provide all the links in the /sitemap.xml, which you get after installing the module. And if you would like to add even more on the top of that, you can have multiple sitemaps as part of the options that are existing in the Nuxt sitemap module. You can have internationalization, you can have dynamic URL endpoints, you can have images, you can have a lot of cool stuff and configuration that you can provide to this module. It's super helpful. The third thing that you can do to help Google discover and control whether they are allowed to crawl this URL or not is the robots.txt file. So add this file inside your public directory, and it will help you guide the crawlers which pages to ignore and which pages to index. For example, here we're allowing all user agents to access our pages, but we're disallowing crawlers from accessing the dashboard because most probably the dashboard is going to have internal content that you don't want to display to the world. And yeah, there is a third module, which is perfectly managed and maintained by Harlan as well. And it's going to help you manage the robots file to allow and disallow robots from crawling specific pages. But even more than just allowing them to discover pages, we can help them about finding out what is this page about or what is the content in this page about. So the first thing, HTML 101, we can provide the title tag, which you can provide a title for your pages. And the use head composable is just one of the many ways that you can do that with Nuxt. For example, here in the app.view component, you can use the use head composable, pass the object, and then use the title template property to provide a placeholder for any title in your pages, followed by a dash and the site title or the site name. And then in any page in your application, you can use the user head composable and the title property to provide the name of this page. For example, here we are in the home page, so we call it home, and it will be rendered like this in HTML. So this is just one of the many ways that you can do it with Nuxt, and it's really, really good. The second thing is meta tags. Meta tags, you can provide metadata about the web page. So you can use the app head properties inside the Nuxt config file to provide a site-wide meta tags. So those meta tags are going to be present in every single page. Or you can use one of the helpers or the helping hand that Nuxt provides, like use head composable, use SEO meta, and SEO components like title, meta, link, head, all of these things that you can use and Nuxt provides for you for easy access to all of these stuff. My favorite one is use SEO meta. It is so cool. Like you provide an object and every top level property of that object represents something. So the title here is for the title tag. The OG title is for the OG title meta. And it is really useful for some situations where you can confuse the name of the attributes that you should use. For example, here, if you're using usehead and you're trying to add OG title, then the OG title doesn't need actually a name attribute, it needs a property attribute. So the use SEO meta takes this complexity away. You just provide the OG title and then the value. It will take care of naming the attribute and assigning the correct value to it. So it's really useful. And something really mind-blowing that I discovered recently inside the Nuxt DevTools, because I've seen a question earlier, people asking about features that we can get from Nuxt SEO to fold it into Nuxt. This is one of the cool features that I see in Nuxt Core. Inside the Nuxt DevTools, you can see Open Graph tab. This tab will have all the missing tags that your page is missing. So not only this, it provides you with a snippet that you can copy and paste in your pages components and provide dynamic data to this copied snippet. And it just takes away all of the problems or all of the time wasted to look for what exactly meta tags are missing. It's really useful. So Harlan again here with another module that provides crazy good utilities for SEO and meta. You can install it like that. And one of the cool features in that module is that you can use SEO meta directly in the Nuxt config file. So you can use the route rules property, and just like you define any route in the route rules, and then you assign to it an object and pass the SEO meta property with whatever you want to pass. So it is really nice. Then we have canonicalization. What is this exactly? Is that a web page can have many versions or variants of the same path. For example, we have the courses path, and we have the courses path, but with a query string to sort the courses by a descending order. Those for search engines, as far as they are concerned, they are duplicate pages. So they are going to be a little bit confused which one to index and which one to render to provide users who use their search engine. And that's going to be a problem if somehow it got so confused thinking that they are two different pages. So they index both, and you end up with two competing pages in your site competing on the same rank for the same content. It doesn't make any sense. So a solution for this is that you provide a link tag. This link tag with the rel attribute set to canonical allow you to provide a stable structure of your page's URL. So you tell search engines that this is the structure that I use. I use HTTP, I use without www, I use without trailing slash, and I don't have query strings. This is the stable version of my URL for this page. You can use the built-in use head composable for that. So for example, here we are getting the slug from use route, and then we are using use head to use the link property, which is an array of objects. Each object represents a link. And the link here, you provide the rel attribute, the canonical value, and then you provide the stable structure of this one. So it doesn't care anymore if you're using query strings. It's going to use this link over there that you provided with for indexing. And Harlan, one more time, and Nuxt SEO utils one more time, it will really help you with auto-generation canonical links for you. And you can customize all of that in the options, so feel free to explore that. It's really cool. The next thing is redirection. So it is super important for crawlers to land on the right page. And Nuxt provides us with the Navigate to helper. The Navigate to helper can be used inside components. So you just prefix it with await, and then you provide the first argument as the path to the URL you want the user to be redirected to. And the second argument is an object where you can provide options. One of the options is redirect code, where you can define the redirect status code that is going to be provided when the navigation happens. And you can use it also inside middlewares, but instead of await, you can return it directly. So you just check out if the user is trying to access the posts page, then just navigate the user to the articles page. And you can use it in Nuxt config, but not the navigate to. You can use the route rules, and you can define your redirection right here. So one of the essential things that you need to focus about, what is the status code that you're going to provide with the redirection? Make sure you provide the correct status code so that the crawler is prepared and knows why this redirection is happening. So for example, here we are doing a redirection from the old URL, which is the posts, to the articles URL, and we are setting the value of the status code to 301. 301 means that permanently moved. So you're letting know the search engine that the content in the old page permanently moved to the new URL. Or you can use 302 for temporarily moved. The next thing is structured data markup. Structured data helps Google better understand your page's content and how it is structured. So it is just a script tag of a type JSON LD. It is added in the head section of your HTML document. And it looks like this. It follows the schema.org schema and properties. And like you see here, you can define what type of data this page has. So it has a recipe. What is the name of this recipe? Party Coffee Cake. And who's the author? Who wrote this? And also when it was published, what is the description, and even the preparation time. How long does it take the user to prepare this recipe that you're providing? And the more information you provide the search engine with, the more relevant the search result will be to the end user, and you're going to have really good traffic with good and high engagement rate. So it's really useful. One of the things or the modules that I've been relying to for so long time is that Nuxt JSON LD module. It's by this author. It's Yimmoot. I don't know how to pronounce that, but it is a cool one. You can just use the use JSON LD composable inside your components, and then you just provide the schema, and it will automatically be injected in the document head, like you see here in the screenshot. And not to forget, Harlan as well has a module for that. So Nuxt schema.org, you can build schema.org graphs with Nuxt. for Nuxt using this module. Just grab it with this command, and you can use the Nuxt config file to define schema.org site-wide. For example, you can define identity for the entire site. So this is about an organization called View School. This is their logo, and there are social media links and so on. So you can provide that in Nuxt config, and it will be displayed or will be rendered in the HTML for all the pages. And I promise you, Harlan is not paying me anything. I promise you. And I think, this is probably the first time he would be hearing from me, but he made a very good work on SEO, and I admire his work. So if you check out Nuxt SEO, if you don't know that yet, all of the things that we mentioned is included in one, let's say, packaged module here. So feel free to check that out and install it. So apart from all of that, apart from guiding crawlers into our pages and helping them discover more, provide content, helpful information to them, we can focus now on the page experience. And Nuxt is really specialized in that. But the page experience here doesn't only goes back to how fast your page is. It has things like, are you using HTTP or HTTPS? Is your pages mobile friendly or not? Do you have interfering ads? Do users go in your application and see ads everywhere so that it's difficult for them to check out the content? Is your content is actually valuable? Does it compete with other pages that has the same content? And the most popular one is Core Web Vitals. And Core Web Vitals here, this is a big question. It's trying to measure how fast does it take the browser to show the final stable version of your main content of the page. So yeah, it is a too long question. So to summarize all of that, search engines loves speed. So it measures everything important about the page loading speed. For example, it measures how long does it take your page to load the largest bulk or the largest block of data, visual data on the page. It will measure the interaction to next paint. It will measure the layout shifts if the page is jumping around because things are not having the right container with the correct dimensions and all of that. So all of these things are being measured by the crawler and by all of the search engines to see how your page compete to other pages that provide similar content. You can test your page performance by using pagespeed.web.dev. And to have better and more deep analysis, you can use the CRUX report, which stands for Chrome User Experience Report. You can use either of those links, provide your domain or provide the URL that you want to investigate, and it will fetch your data from Google and send it to you so that you can visualize how you are doing. It's really awesome. Check it out. The next thing is server-side rendering, right? So we all know by now, and we mentioned this in the beginning, that server-side rendered doesn't block your application from rendering the actual content because the JavaScript is being loaded in the backend, or let's say in the back scene or the backstage. Yeah, the backstage is the right word. Anyway, so it is loading all of that in the backstage, which means that they are not blocking, or it's not blocking the user from seeing the actual content. So it's really good with performance. And another thing is that static it when you can, right? So pre-render pages as static files when they don't need frequent updates. So you can generate static pages for all discoverable links referenced in the homepage with npx Nuxt generate. And you can also leverage route rules to selectively choose specific URLs to be pre-rendered, and they are going to be served to the user immediately. And you can also reduce JavaScript bundle size. You can do that by prefixing heavy components with lazy to split them into a separate chunk. So here in this example, we have here a state that is set to false and two components that are going to show up only according to this specific state, which means that we don't want both of them in our final bundle. We just want one of them according to a specific state. So we can prefix them or prefix the name with lazy, and that will separate them into a separate chunk. And only the component we need is going to be requested. And when we need the other one, it's going to be fetched later. So it's not going to impact the final bundle size. It's not going to impact the page loading speed. And also you can leverage dynamic imports with all dependencies that are not essential for the initial page load, right? So the initial page load doesn't require those essentially to render the content, and also unlikely will be used by all users, something that not all users are going to use. For example, here we have some sort of a submit feedback functionality, and this uses some sort of an SDK. Maybe it's a big one, and you only use it here. You don't need it anywhere else. And most probably not all users are going to submit the feedback. So by doing dynamic imports like this inside the function, it's going to be importing this specific JavaScript files related to the SDK only when it's needed, only when the user clicks on submit feedback. Maybe you can add loading spinner or something until it is fetched and the action is completed. So it's really useful. And then you can optimize internal navigation, which is really important. Nuxt automatically prefetch the links on visibility, right? So it can help reduce latency by prefetching resources before they are actually needed by the user. But in case you have so many links for some reason that I don't know, and a lot of them are visual or a lot of them are present in the viewport when the user first render the page, make sure to set the prefetch on interaction instead of visibility. And of course, it depends on the use case. It depends on your preference. But yeah, a lot of prefetches might hurt or harm your performance. So yeah, if you have a lot of them, too many of them, like hundreds of them, just set the prefetch on interaction instead of visibility. Pre-connection and preload hints. We can give hints to the browser to do things before they know they actually need it. For example, we can establish early connection with external domains. If you're loading fonts from Google Fonts, then before you actually load the font, you can provide the hint to the user with a link tag with a pre-connect set to the rel attribute, and then the domain that you want to establish early connection with it. And that will help the browser know that you are going to connect with this domain to get a resource. So it's going to help you with the speed of that. Or you can preload and cache an entire resource to ensure that it's fully loaded up front. For example, here we're using useHead, the link property. And here, like we said, it's going to be an array of many objects. The object here represents a preload link, right? So it is a rel with the type preload. And then the type of it is font. And then the href for the font, you define where is it. And then you load it as a font. And all of these things are going to help the browser to get or preload this resource before it knows that it actually needs it. And reduce unused CSS, which is a really cool trick. Unused CSS contributes to the overall size of CSS files, so it is really nice to lower that size or minimize that size as much as possible. And Nuxt.js uses CSS Nano by default in the build step to minimize CSS. But what you can do as an extra step is that you can utilize Nuxt Purge CSS module to remove the unused CSS. You can also optimize images because images contribute in or has a huge impact on the page loading speed. And mostly all of our pages now has images. So you can use Nuxt image to optimize the images. For example, here we have a Nuxt image component. We pass the src, we pass the alt text, which is going to show up for screen readers and all of that. And we have the sizes props, and the sizes props is going to help you provide different sizes for different screen sizes of the image. So let's say, for example, the image is not going to show full size if the user is using mobile phone. You know what I mean? So it is going to be very helpful. And all of that, we can also use the provider. The provider prop here is going to allow us to pass a specific provider. Could be Cloudflare, could be any provider. But here I'm using IPX by on.js, and it is going to generate for you multiple src set for multiple versions of your image with multiple sizes for different screen sizes. It's really cool. Another cool thing is that you can define the format. So you can use a modern image format like WebP or ADIF instead of PNG or all of that. And they are very good with compressing the size, and that's going to help you or help the browser load the page faster. All the images below the fold should be lazily loaded. Any image that is in the page and the user is not seeing it in the viewport, when they load the page, needs to be set to lazy. So use the lazy attribute if you're using native HTML, but with Nuxt, you can pass to the Nuxt image the loading prop and then set the lazy to, set the value to lazy. And also you can provide a placeholder, something that is going to be auto-generated by Nuxt image, which is a very, very bad quality image version of your image showing until, or maybe a blurred image showing until the actual image is loaded. Above the fold images should be eagerly loaded and preferably preloaded. So on the opposite of the last step, if any image is going to show above the fold so the user can see it with the initial page load, it is within viewport, then set loading to eager and preload the image. Another thing that you should take into account is the Nuxt Booster module. It is a really good performance booster for Nuxt applications. Check it out, try it carefully because there are many advanced features that it has, and it might impact your application if you're not aware what you're doing. So check it out, it's really cool. And there's just so much more we can do and so little time to present. But check out Nuxt Nation's lineup. They have amazing speakers, and all of them are going to talk about very interesting topics to optimize performance, optimize data fetching, and yeah, that will be it. I'll post the slides here on X and Blue Sky, so you can check this out there. And yeah, use it as a reference, like I said, as a checklist where you can explore more and expand on the topics I mentioned. And that will be it. Thank you all so much. And yeah, it was cool to be here.
Yay! Wonderful. Thank you. All right. We do have a few questions. Let's start with, how do you get the last modified to work with Nuxt content pages? Nuxt content pages.
Well, I'm not pretty sure of that because I didn't use Nuxt content enough to try this use case. But yeah, I wish it's inside the documentation somewhere, or maybe on Stack Overflow, but it's not with me.
All right. Thank you. What would be a good solution for cookie consent management in Nuxt?
Well, I think like whenever there is a cookie involved, I use cookie composable. It is really cool, and it allows you to track the cookie and track the changes inside the cookie. And you can just create some sort of a module that will show up when the user is maybe first time visited the module and never accepted the cookie, and you just tick as accepted whenever they change the value of this cookie or something like that. So yeah, it is just the use cookie composable. I think it's really helpful in that use case.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. For schema.org, which implementation is best, microdata or JSON ID?
Is how I went for it every single time. And I think how most of the popular sites use anyway. So I think it's more, standardized than any other kind of data that you can provide for schema.org. And even the references that you're going to see everywhere in Google documentation is using JSON LD. So I would go for whatever that's inside Google documentation because at least that's all, that's the search engine we're all aiming to please.
Thank you. All
Sure.
right. Any updates on L10N? Example, if a Spanish speaker is in Singapore, the site defaults for Southeast Asia or Singapore region with I18N config, but I want to offer the option to view the content in Spanish.
Well, like I'm not pretty sure, but the Nuxt module for internationalization is pretty good, and it's so wide. It covers a lot of things about providing different versions of your pages. So I would highly suggest that you refer back to the documentation and that.
Thank you. All right, last question of, when should I use preload and when should I use pre-connect, and how to choose?
Right. So preload is basically you're setting a specific resource, right? You know that this resource is essential for your page to load, and you want the page to load as quickly as possible. So the preload itself is going to preload the entire resource and cache it for later use. But the problem is that it's going to preload the actual resource, all of it, and everything related to it. So it means that it's not going to use it, but it loads the entire resource. So unless the resource is needed within the first, let's say, 1 second of your page load, then use preload. Sorry, unless you actually aware that the resource is needed in the first second, then you shouldn't use preload. Preload is used only whenever the resource that you want to preload is going to be needed in the first second or two from the page loading. But pre-connect is going to just give a hint to the browser that this domain I want to establish an early connection, an early connection, so that I want to maybe fetch some resources from there. So it depends really on the use case, and it depends what you're trying to do. But use preload with careful, because preload really is not for any resource that you would need in the future. It's just for resources that you would need very closely to the page loading. And also, preloading is going to set the fetch priority to high. So it is going to ignore the recommended approach or the recommended algorithm or the actual algorithm that is followed by the browser to load important resources, because the browser has an algorithm to follow for that. But it's going to force that on them. So you need to be careful which resources to preload. But pre-connection is pretty safe. You're just establishing an early connection.
Great. And we actually have two more questions that snuck in the nick of time. So,
Sure.
regarding JSON LD, do you have any performance suggestions when it comes to big amount of JSON LD?
Well, I always go by this, which is, for example, there is JSON LD and schema for courses, right? So let's say that you have a courses page that is showing 10 courses, and then you can go and to another paginated page, which is page number 2, for another 10 courses. Just stick with the 10 courses that is showing on the page to render or to display that in the JSON LD schema. Do not try to fill it with data that it isn't on the page. So for another example here, there is a schema that allow you to get courses outside of the scope of the current page. So for example, if we have a page on VSchool that is for Vue.js, and that is a Vue.js course, we have a schema that will allow us to display or render other courses, maybe another Nuxt.js course. So we can say that the Vue.js course is related to Nuxt.js course, and Nuxt.js course is related to maybe some modules course. So all of these are related, but you are not forced to render all of them all at once in the HTML. Just try to stick to what's on the page and maybe some information about the organization, and that's all. Because overdoing it might end up with a lot or a big bulk of it. But let me also highlight that it will not impact performance that much. Like, I've never been in a situation where I needed to reduce it because it's impacting my performance, right? It doesn't load anything externally. It's just a schema with some text inside it. So it doesn't really load or doesn't impact the performance that much. So you should just not think about it too much, but don't overload your schema.
Awesome. And now the last one. How much of SEO can we automate? Also, can AI help in here?
Of course, like there are a lot of tools out there that can help you out. For example, the content generation tools. I believe all of the SEO monitoring tools out there, like SEMrush, Ahrefs, and SimilarWeb, a lot of other platforms provide AI content generations. It's really cool, and it's going to help you with provide relevant content related to what is really hot and what people are looking for on search engines. And another thing is that, for example, Uber Suggest is going to suggest for you new content that you can publish, and you can monitor the traffic to see if that content is really or this recommendation is really good. So Uber Suggest, you can access the platform, and it's going to analyze your site. It's going to provide you with new ideas for new content that you can generate, and you just write the content for that and try to monitor that. How traffic is it going? How much traffic is it getting? And see and observe the improvement in your traffic. So there are a lot of other ways that can help you with that. I'm not aware of any Nuxt module that is integrating AI into generating SEO meta tags or something like that. But there are many tools out there that can help you with this, and I'm sure that they're providing APIs so that you can communicate with it. But in my humble opinion, don't just add more requests and dependencies to your site so that you can use AI to generate for you the meta tags. Or let's say Nuxt has composables like use SEO meta and use head. It will help you provide dynamic meta tags, dynamic data about your content for the users. So you don't need the help of AI in that. So you need to count on yourself, trust your judgment, and come up with the best meta tags and the best descriptions for your pages.
That is a great way to wrap it up. Like, thank you again, Mostafa. We
Thanks.
greatly appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you so much, Jen. Thank you.
All right, y'all. Up next, we have a quick video from Instant Dev, and then we'll hear from Eduardo. All right, y'all. Let's give a warm welcome to Eduardo San Martin Maratti, who is here to share his insights and expertise. Eduardo is a seasoned developer with a knack for crafting efficient solutions. His session promises to be packed with actionable takeaways that you won't want to miss. Welcome to the stage, Eduardo.
Hey, hi everybody. I'm just making sure my sound is good. All seems good. So I'm going to mute this for myself. Good. So today I got a different talk from my usual talks because I'm going to do a full live demo. I'm not going to show you a lot of slides. This talk is about having a better data fetching solution in Nuxt, specifically for Nuxt, since we're doing Nuxt Nation this time. But the solution is not only for Nuxt, just to be clear. So my name is Eduardo. On GitHub, you can find me as Posva, also on Twitter or Blue Sky. I'm the author of URouter and Pinia. And today, I want to show you how much we can improve data fetching for Nuxt with Pina Colada. So what I have prepared for you is a migration that I've already done in the past. So the version that you see here is the actual deployed version, as you can see by the URL. It's a bit small, but you can probably imagine that you don't see the numbers there, so it's not a local host. This is a demo you can visit yourself, and you have just some to-dos, very simple to-dos. It's also showcasing Nuxt Hub, by the way. And so we have two versions, one that is called to-dos and the other one optimistic to-dos. My goal is to show you today both. So it's more, instead of giving you a talk about Pina Colada as API, let me show you how to migrate directly a working version of an application with Pina Colada and make it better. So what we have right now is only this page, which is one with the to-dos, and we have what we call loading states, so to say. So for example, if I try to add one to-do here, probably some reloads. Yeah, I got logged out. So as you can see, we have some loading states on the side. So what I mean by loading state is that the application is going to become unresponsive. It's going to enter a loading state of, hey, I'm waiting for data to come back. Request is being made. So I cannot let you do some actions, right? So let's see what the code looks like for this. So what I have in the background is the server running with a version that is not on the actual repository right now, because this was the previous version that was using useFetch and then just some regular fetches. And what we can see here is that we have three different operations that I'm going to call notations, and one query here, which is the read operation, which is using useFetch. So my goal today is first show you how to make this code more expressive by following a declarative approach with Pina Colada. And the second one is going to make the UX smooth, even when we have a slow internet. So that's thanks to Optimistics updates. So first of all, what is Pina Colada? So Pina Colada is a state management, an async state management library. It's a plugin for Pina. By that, I mean that it has a few stores, a few methods, and it relies on storing the state with Pina and also using the plugin system of Pina. Other than that, the goal is really to remove all the boilerplate related to async state management. And instead of showing you the docs, I'm just going to show you the code of what we need to do. Let me just reload the page. Okay. So I already installed everything like in documentation. What I want to do is start right away by migrating my queries. I'm going to start first by the query and then by the mutations. So a query is any operation that does a read, right? So most of the time it's a get, but some APIs might have a post or a put. The idea is that you're reading information from the server and this information can change over time. So here we're using useFetch, and in Pina Colada we're going to use useQuery. So Here is the use query. It's auto-imported. As you can see here, it comes from Pina Colada. It's auto-imported. And we're going to pass an object. And in this object, we have a query function, which is going to be what we have here. So useFetch is using a special $fetch behind the scenes. So you might be tempted to do fetch here and almost like that, but it's actually a little bit different. It's I'm going to call these fetch. Use request fetch. Behind the scenes, useFetch uses this fetch, so we need to actually use this one. Let me just go back here. Up, up. Give me just this 1 second. There we go. So this is the first part, right? We want to have, all right. We want to have the query, which is going to be the function that returns a promise with the data. And then the second part is the key. The key is going to be a unique key that allows the cache to store these results somewhere. It's just that. Okay, and then we have some TypeScript error, and I've seen that before. Let's just remove the formatting. We are going to just say as here, not to, maybe not. Sometimes I have these errors, but it's not related to Pina Colada, it's just Nuxt. I'm going to ignore it then. So use query is going to give us a very similar code here. So it's actually just the same. It's data to do's and then refresh. We also have that. And then we can remove this function. Now, one thing here is we're not going to use the refresh function. We're going to make it differently because the idea is this query is going to automatically call the refresh for us whenever it's needed. And instead of having to couple the mutations and the query like we have right now, or we had before I changed the code, we're going to decouple them thanks to the cache. And the cache is going to play the role of a bridge between the query and the mutations. And this is going to be very interesting because in this application, we have just one page, but in real applications, we have more than just one component for a page. We have maybe the mutation happening in a subcomponent and the query happening on the page. So it's not as simple as having everything in one single component. All right. So another point here to note is that the key is an array. This is because the keys in Pina Colada are hierarchical. So I'm not going to go through everything in this demo, but the idea is you can have invalidations of cache and cache that are connected based on the key. So when you invalidate, for example, a list of users, you can also invalidate any detailed version of that user list that you had. So here we only have these to do, so it doesn't change much. But it's an interesting concept that is worth checking out if you're interested in learning more. All right. So that's pretty much it. We don't have any await, as you can notice here, but it's still awaited in the server. So we still have SSR happening behind the scenes. This is thanks to on-server prefetch. And now we can move on to some of the imitations, which is the interesting part, right? So let's start by the last one, which is the delete, which is one of the simplest one. We're going to call use mutation here, and we're going to pass an object as well. And this object is going to contain the mutation function. And I'm going to make it a narrow function because it's easier. And so in this mutation, we're going to pass the fetch that we have from the bottom. So it's actually fetch is just good enough. And we just call delete, and we need to pass the ID. So just the same code that we have underneath. To do.id. The only thing missing is this to do. So we're going to add that parameter as well. So we go here and we just put it there. And I have an extra S there, so that's it. So pretty much the same as having the function here. So we're doing the fetch, and now we have to check about everything else that we do. So we are awaiting the deletion to be finished, and then we are doing some kind of local update. Now this is interesting because I think the correct version that Sebastian wanted to do was more like this. So you update the version before doing the request, and then you handle locally if it works, which is not there. So this is like a partial optimistic update, but not really. It's not really useful. So this line is not really that useful because we're doing a refresh right after, which is going to update the to-do list. So it's going to check the server for a new version and then just display a toast. So what we have here is a refresh when we're finished. And there is also one thing that is not taken into account is that if we, for any reason, the delete fails, that probably means that we don't have an up-to-date version of the to list. So we should also refresh in that case. So instead of just doing it after a succeed, we should also do it on an error. So here we could have a try catch. In this version, we're gonna use unsettled. So unsettled happens in both scenarios if we have an error or if we succeed, and we can just call refresh. Now I did remove refresh, so we're gonna call something different, and I'm gonna show you in a moment. But first, let me add the unsuccess, which is going to allow me to have the toast. So here I'm just copying over this line, and the result that we get here is the actual return value from the fetch. Okay, so we don't have refresh anymore, right? I kept it, but we're not going to use it. So what do we use instead? Instead, we're going to use the query cache. So the query cache is not here yet. So what I do is up here, I'm going to do query cache. Yeah, that's correct. Query cache, use query cache. Again, this comes from Pina Colada. And what we have is actually a Pina store that has a lot of actions related to cache. And this allows us to, for example, invalidate queries. And so we can specify different filters. In this case, just the key is enough. And we can call invalidate queries on that, meaning that automatically any query with this key is going to be invalidated and refetch if necessary. So depending on, for example, if it's active, if it's not active, if it's not used in any page, if any visible component, then it's not going to refetch. But if it's being used, which is the case because we are in this scenario in just one page, we're going to get a new version. And then I can just remove that. So that's the migration. It takes a bit more lines. I also added a couple of empty lines here. But of course, it's all very organized and it's easy to extend, which is what we want here, being able to extend. And so now I'm going to do the same for the toggles to do, which is pretty much the same. So I'm going to do, oh yeah, sorry. I forgot to get the result from the mutation. So we get a mutate function that I'm going to rename into delete to do, I think. Yes. We can have access to all the things which are similar to queries, but I'm not going to cover that yet. So here, use mutation. I'm going to do very similar mutation. And what do we do? This. So I'm just going to copy this. And we do need a to-do here. So let's go here. Just like that. All right. So we have the mutation working. And then let's check the actual code that we have here. So we are toggling the completed of the to-do. So I probably need to do the same here because I didn't move that. So a number of to-do, copy this line here. And then we have again a refresh. So this is again the same concept. We are invalidating the cache and refetching again. So we do the same. We just do unsettled and then invalidate the query. Same as the code that we have here. And last but not least, we're going to get our function. So mutate is going to go toggle to do. And then we can just remove that. All right. So these are very similar. Now let's take a look at the add to do, which is a little bit more complicated. The add to do is trimming the value and doing nothing if it's just empty blank spaces. And then we have a local loading state that we set to true and it's set to false in the end. And so we're posting the to do, we are pushing the to do locally. So it's like a, again, half-baked optimistic update. Then we're refreshing and then we have this toast and then we're focusing the input again. And then if we have an error, we want to show a toast. So let's do in a few places. So first part, mutation. Okay, mutation is always the first part. We only need the to do, right? So I'm just going to copy this and I'm going to simplify it right here. So I don't need the return, the new to do value here. Why not? What I'm going to do here is put title, which is a string, and I'm going to remove it from here. And I'm going to say if title trim I can return, but instead I'm just going to throw a new error utility is required. Because the idea is this mutation, if the title is invalid, it should throw, right? It's supposed to be an error. It should never enter this state because the form is probably setting the input to required. All right, so that's the first part. And then we have the error handling, which is the part that I'm going to do first. We have this here. Okay, I can copy that. And then here and do on error. I have an error and I'm going to paste the code. So here we have just an error. What I'm going to do, I think I have a is result. Yeah, there you go. All right. Both of these is going to be undefined, right? Yeah. So it actually had a few bugs there before, I guess, but it's fine. So now we have done the catch. Now I need to do the success here. So we have an invalidation again, the refresh. So let's do that. Oh, although same as before, if we also want to handle the error case, so let's just do on settle. And then we have on success, and on success is just showing the to-do that was created. Let me check if it's the same. Yes. And then we are going to clear the input. We're going to clear the input and then focus the input. We're going to change these a little bit more, but before that, let me just buckle up and show you a working version, right? So here, the last part I need is mutate, which is going to be the to do. And you might notice that we have this loading state here, right, that we set to true and then to false in the same function. So I'm going to remove that because it's actually just the is loading here. And I'm going to name that loading just not to rename anything on the template. And I can remove these function completely. All right. So I shouldn't have any errors on the side and these should be working. So here, let's open the console. Okay. Everything, those warnings are normals. That's one. And we have already a bug. So we have, so I think I forgot a return basically. No, I have it here. Let me check real quick. What did I mess up? Okay, first of all, it's not doing anything, right? So when I reload the page, or let's do even better. Let's go here. Let's go to the to-dos. We are fetching the to-dos, which is empty. And then if I do a new one, is it posting a new one? Okay, so it's not sending the add to-do, which is a bit weird. Oh, okay. yeah, I forgot, of course. Since my function now receives the actual text of the to-do, I need to put here the new to-do. Otherwise, it's not going to work. I think the other ones probably need some changing. Tool to do. Okay, the other ones are correct. Yeah, this one was just being called like that. So let's add it now, and there we go. So as you can see, I removed the refresh call completely. There is no more refresh call or anything. And now we have a version that automatically updates. Everything else also works. So what I don't have working is the focus, and I'm gonna fix that in a moment. If I reload the page, you see that I have the same. Now the issue with this version is that if we have a slow internet, because we are in this loading state, the UI is going to become completely unresponsive while we are waiting for the data. And as you can see, we have other things like delayed. I click there and it changed a lot longer. Here I click in multiple things and it takes forever to update. So let me first fix the focusing. The focus is not working here because we actually need to wait 2 ticks. When we schedule this tick, we're still waiting for the unsuccess. So the query still waits for the unsuccess and the unsettle if it does anything. So after that, only loading becomes false and the input becomes undisabled. So it becomes enabled again. So it means that we need to wait for 2 ticks, which is a bit weird. I'm not gonna deny that, but so how do we write this a little bit more? It's like 10, we do another next tick, and then we can try to focus. I think that's the idea. Let's see if it works. And then it should focus. No. Oh yeah, now it worked. Okay. Without the throttling, it looks like this. Okay. All right. So this is the version that is similar to what we have. But what I want to propose you today is something that it looks much better. So the optimistic update is really about so first, yeah, what is the optimistic update? The idea is most of the time when we're doing an operation on our application, we know how the data will be impacted after that change. So when we modify the list of to-dos, we know that locally our to-do list is just going to have a new to-do entry on the array. So what we can do is, instead of waiting for the request to go on and to go to the server and come back, we change locally the data at the same time we send the request. So even before sending the request. And usually most of the time it just works out, right? It comes back, it succeeds, and we still refetch just in case the data, and because things are the same, nothing happens. But the issue, and this is the complicated part, right, is that if we have an error, we need to roll back to the previous version, and that can become a little bit more complicated depending on the cases. So today I want to show you, if I have the time, to show you a complete version of the rolling back. So I'm going to start again by changing the delete, because the delete is one of the easiest one. So we're going to keep the unsettle and the unsuccess. These are not going to change, if I recall correctly. What we need to change, what we need to do is to change the local version. So we're going to change the data on the cache in order to let the application render a new version. So here I'm going to use the unmutate. The unmutate hook is a little bit different because it's called when the mutation, even before calling mutation, right? So here we have the to-do, which is going to be the same as we have here. And we want to a couple of things. First, we need to get the previous version of the arrays of the to-dos. We're going to save a copy in order to roll back. Then we're going to find the to-do that the user is trying to delete. Then we're going to create a new version of the array of to-dos. We're going to put that in the cache, and we're going to return a few variables that can be used in the other hooks in case things fail. So the first thing is going to be the old to-dos, and we're going to use another function of the query cache. We're going to get the the query data of the to-dos. Then we're going to try to find the index of the one missing there. So here I notice that we have this. We can instead do an empty array if there is nothing. Yeah, you don't need -1. And so then we're going to check if we have that all to do, if the to do is there. So if to do index is bigger than -1, we're going to update, so create a new copy of the array. So what I'm going to do here is actually create a new to do's. Do I need to do splice here? Probably not. I mean, we could do a slice here. It's fine. So we have a copy. And here we can do to-dos.splice. Oops. And we just remove that version. What did I change? This is an array. Slice. An array. And oh, okay. Just a typo. So we splice that value, and then what we do is we set in the query cache the data to this new version. And now, do I even need to do a let here? Probably not. Now we're going to return the information. So here we can return anything we want. The idea is return any information that might be necessary for our rollback. So we want to return the old to-dos, the new to-dos, and the actual to-do, I think, that we added. But I'm not completely sure about that. So I'm just going to keep it like that. And so now we're still not handling the error, right? So let's add the on-error handler, which was completely missing there. And here we're going to extract the old to-dos and the new to-dos. Now you will notice that these properties can be undefined. And this is because the onMutate can still throw an error, right? And if it throws an error, the mutation won't even run, and it will definitely not return the values here. So these are undefined. So that's how you can have that. Now, here is the simple version, like the rollback is, let's revert the version to the one we had before. But if you want to be very precise, you want to really handle all possible scenarios, you have to do a little bit more than this. So that little bit more is going to check that the version that we have of the cache, or rather that nobody else has touched the cache. So how do we do that? We simply check if the version in the cache is the one that we set here. That's why we return the new to-dos. So we can just check if new to-dos, so if they are not undefined, and if query cache dot get query data is equal to new to-dos. So if we have that, it means that nobody else touched the cache, so we can revert to the old version. We are sure that we are the ones with an error. And then if we want, we can console log the error, right? Console log the error and toast if we want also. Okay, so how does this look here? If we delete a to-do here, it's really fast. But if we do slow, it's still really fast. However, you see that the message that told me, yeah, it was really deleted, happened a few seconds later. So the UI is completely responsive, even though the whole thing is a bit slow. So here I'm in normal, and I can delete things really fast, but if I go to slow, I can still delete really fast. And that's the whole idea, right? I'm not sure how much time left I have. If in the chat they can tell me how many minutes I have. Not much. Okay, so I'm gonna close up. I don't want to go over too much. The idea for the rest of the code is pretty similar, right? The add to do is a little bit more complicated because it's not a little bit more complicated. It's pretty much the same idea. It's just that you have to find the to do on the list, remove it. So the rollback of the data is a little bit different. What I want to show you is how it looks like in the end. So in the end, this is the production version. We have the optimistic to-dos. And one of the things that also optimistic UIs allows us to do is to remove some of the pending states completely. So instead of having a loading here, we just remove that entirely. It doesn't need to be there anymore. And so let's add a few to-dos here. Okay, so you see it's really fast. Now let's do the scrolling. And 3G is really slow. And I can click here as much as I want. I can add things in the middle. You will notice that things are grayed out for a while until they are accepted. But everything else is like everything can be changed, can be pending, and it's just smooth, 100% smooth, even with a very, very slow connection. And so to wrap up, just go back to my notes. Let me make sure I didn't forget anything important to say since I skipped adding to-dos. All right. So yeah, this is to conclude, or so to say, the optimistic UI, sorry, is not something you should use everywhere. This is something to be aware of as well. It's more about compare when you have a pending UI where you have these kind of loading states, and an optimistic UI could help the user to use your application smoother, right? If you have one single operation that is blocking everything else, then there is no point in having an optimistic UI, because if the user still has to wait for something to be done on the server before moving on, then there is nothing to do. So just keep that in mind. The idea is that with Pina Colada, we are enabling this declarative approach where we declare the queries in one part and the mutations in other part, and they communicate with each other thanks to the query cache. So in practice, we don't have just one page with one component. So this approach really helps us decouple the code, keep things declarative so we can focus on the data flow and the business logic, which is one of the main reasons I personally use Vue, and I personally love Vue. And it helps us keep our code way more maintainable in the long run. So just one thing to note is that Pina Colada is, I have been working on these for a while, so I'm pretty happy with the results. It's still not on 1.0, right? But the foundation that I've shown you is pretty stable. It's not going to change. It's more the plugin API that is still in an experimental state, because I still want to see what is needed by plugins to ensure that Pina Colada is as extensible as possible, as needed. Also, if you're interested in learning how it was actually built in a part of the exercises of the Mastering Pina. When I was doing my Mastering Pina course, is when I came up with this abstraction that I have created so many times, and I decided to bundle it as an application of how do I do optimistic UIs and cache validations. And so this is how Pina Colada was born. All right, if you are interested in learning more, or if you're using it, please reach out if you have feedback on Twitter or Blue Sky or just GitHub. And thanks for your time.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right. We do have a few questions. I know we're short on time, so we're not going through all of them, but we do have a few of what's the difference between Tansac query and Pina Colada, and why would you why prefer Pina?
Yeah, so they are very similar. They definitely cover the same problems, right? They solve the same issues. You could say the simple answer is Pina Colada is my version, my approach to these hash-based client-side async state management. But since Pina is only for Vue, it has some advantages over Tanstack query. So it's way smaller. It's like 2 kilobytes and it's less than 3 kilobytes. The baseline is very, very small. And it's really a bit more performant in terms of memory and speed, because it doesn't need to support frameworks like React, which are the way they work behind the scenes, the way you optimize for re-renders is different. So you don't need to handle all of this complexity. And apart from that, it's also more extensible. Like it's the way you can hook into the creation of the cache through Pinia plugins is pretty flexible. And last but not least, it also has data loaders. So data loaders is a new API for the data fetching in Router. So it's really bringing everything together. So here we have data fetching, but it doesn't require the router. And then data loaders is integrating the fetching into the navigation. So it has another whole sets of benefits. And the idea is that you can combine them both without, so you don't lose any other benefits of having Pina Colada, and have the best of navigation aware data fetching and cache aware data fetching, so to say.
Great, thank you. All right, up next, does Pina Colada support WebSockets and subscriptions instead of polling and refreshing?
So this is up to your server implementation. The idea of Pina Colada is more, if you have a function that returns a promise, then it will work. So technically WebSockets are not that. So I would say it's not, it doesn't work like that. So unless you have a way, you can probably work around in a way, but there is no out-of-the-box support for a WebSocket and subscriptions.
Okay, thank you. Are there any considerations with using Pina Colada in a global store?
So if you use query or use mutation especially use query in a global store, in a Pina store, since the store is global and is never disposed, the cache entry for the query will never be disposed either. So there is something called the garbage collection timer, the garbage collection time. So you can specify that, or you can lower it because by default it's 5 minutes, I think, or 3 minutes. And if a query is not active for that amount of time, it will be garbage collected to avoid having the cache grow indefinitely.
Thank you. And two more. Are we losing types with rfetch?
No, we're not losing the types. I think that was my editor. I don't know why it didn't work that time. And also this rfetch, the request fetch, I didn't explain it very well, but it avoids the round trip on the client side. So when you do server-side rendering, the page comes to the client, it doesn't perform an extra fetch because it already did that on the server. This is a Nuxt feature, by the way. Normally the types are not lost. I don't know what's wrong with my editor or anything. Usually they work.
Fair enough. And a last question. Can I somehow extract the response headers, not only body, and store them?
Yeah, of course. As long as you return a promise of the data you want to store, that's all you need. You can just use fetch, and then in the promise you return an object with the data and the headers into properties, and then in the cache you will have both.
Perfect. Great. That is all the questions we have for you, Eduardo. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
All right, y'all. Quick video from about mastering Pina, and then we'll hear from Michael Thiessen.
Hi everyone, my name is Eduardo. I'm a front-end freelancer and a Vue.js core team member since 2017 or such, and I'm known for being the author of Vue Router and also Pina. You will gain a comprehensive understanding of state management with Vue.js in many scenarios, including Nuxt with server-side rendering. We also explore concepts that are available in both Vue and Nuxt, such as refactoring with composables and unit testing. I created Mastering Pina based on how I designed Pina and how I have seen it used in real-world applications by companies I have consulted for. I believe in the power of hands-on learning, so I've designed this course to prioritize practice over passive viewing. In it, we dive deep into Pina, covering everything from the basics to the most advanced features like plugins and server-side rendering.
All right. Up next, we have the insightful Michael Thiessen, who will guide us through the intricacies of modern web development. Michael brings a wealth of experience to the stage, is known for his innovative approaches to tackling challenges and tech landscapes. Get ready for an engaging session that will broaden your understanding. Welcome to the stage, Michael.